The content that I'm going to share with you today has been co-constructed and co-developed with a close colleague of mine, Louis Lord Nelson, who has expertise in universal design for learning. And the work has been funded by and kind of informed by and shaped by some of the needs in the state of Indiana. We've both had a partnership with the Indiana IEP Resource Center. We were all sitting around a table, probably having conversations we shouldn't have been having at that moment in time, and somebody had the smart idea of saying, let's try to bring UDL and MTSS together. It's not good enough to say you have one and the other and they're just kind of coexisting. There's more there. So Louis and I set out with support from the center, and what we thought would be a couple of weeks of chatting about the two frameworks ended up being about a year-long project and in multiple hours, and we'll bring you through that process. A little bit about me and my background relative to this session. My work in multi-tiered system of support has kind of evolved over time. I was part of a state of New Hampshire project back in the early 2000s when we were, for us in New Hampshire, we were just thinking about bringing RTI and PBIS together and just beginning to think about braiding academic and behavioral supports. That work has since evolved in my partnership with another national center called the SWIFT Education Center, School-Wide Integrated Framework for Transformation, SWIFT Center, which partnered with the state of California for a statewide MTSS project, California MTSS. So for those of you familiar with those materials, I drew heavily from those in our work with Louis to construct this kind of new idea of bringing these together at a deeper level. So I've worked in installing and implementing MTSS now for a lot of years. I guess we're pushing 20 years on that. And with an eye to kind of examining issues as they exist in really different schools, different districts around the country. So hopefully that informs the session a little bit today. The goals for this session, the hour and 25 minutes that we have together that are left, is that I kind of want us to have a series of dialogues referencing our tools, but really opportunities for you all to talk and reflect, where we'll explore some of the core beliefs and big ideas that exist underneath these large frameworks of MTSS and UDL. We're going to take a look at a deeper dive into 5 kind of what I would consider essential components that really are pivot points in the braiding process of these two frameworks, and then give you opportunities to review the full list of 12 components that we came up with as we did the braiding work across the two models. So if that's not what you're looking for, there is a significant Q&A session at the end, and hopefully we can personalize to you. Just to kind of get a little bit of a feel for the vibe of people in the room, and I'm going to hope that the people in the room are representative of those of you who are participating virtually, just to give me a little kind of understanding of your background. How many of you are already implementing MTSS? You would say, we do MTSS within our school or district. Okay, so the bulk of you have some MTSS background. For the others who didn't raise your hand, do you know what MTSS is basically? Raise your hand if you do. Okay, so only a few don't have that background. All right. Universal design for learning. Those of you who are already fully implementing universal design for learning in your schools, classrooms, districts. One brave soul says we're fully implementing. Okay, great. Others, do you know, kind of have basic 101 training in universal design for learning? If so, raise your hand. Okay, so the session is built on an assumption that people are coming with some significant background, but I will try to fill in enough without boring you to tears, to go back to basic definitions of these two things. And I've put in some links for folks who need more background. I have some short go-to videos that give you the 101 of each of those. And if you want, during some of the activities, you can watch those instead of doing the activity. Okay, so we'll give you some choice in how you engage in today's session. The flow, what we're going to do, we've already nailed one, introductions and goals for the session. I want to give you an opportunity to talk with each other about why you came to this, what your interest is, and then bring you through the grappling process and the design process that Louis and I used, drawing some attention to some core belief issues that we struggled with and what they meant for practice. Then have you grappling with those mindsets and those big ideas behind the two frameworks, and then digging into the actual tool itself and looking at specific components as we braid together, with opportunities then for you to apply and reflect. 3 tools that you'll need for engaging in that agenda are found on SCHED. You'll see that the one that's labeled 01 now has the word final in front of it, because I did update it when I realized that I was actually being broadcast virtually. I needed to change all of my directions to make sure there was something for each audience in each environment. The other 2 stand as they were. So, first activity, I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to turn and talk with a neighbor, somebody sitting nearby. If you're watching virtually and you're sitting alone, just take some quiet reflection time for yourself and answer this question: why am I interested in the overlap of universal design for learning and multi-tiered system of support? Why this session, basically? Turn to a shoulder partner, a neighbor, or get up and move to a neighbor. And I'll give you a couple minutes to talk. Great, thank you. Thank you. You all were in the MTSS trainings, weren't you? Here, the California MTSS trainings? Were you part of the teams? Okay. You 2 look familiar. I will place you. Did you live in New Hampshire? No. Well, that must be it. That's why you look familiar. All New Hampshire people look alike. Okay, it looks like people are wrapping up their conversations. Let's go ahead and come back. Do a couple of people want to share what's bringing you here? Why are you interested in this? Just raise your hand. We have people with microphones who will run to you. Right over here, of course, the furthest person from you. There we go.
So I find, in a really interesting position. We're from Berkeley Unified, and we have taken on almost every initiative that falls under the MTSS umbrella. And they're there, right? It exists. You go around, we've worked on alignment. We're all RTI, the world of RTI. We're the leads. We've been doing the work. We're in the work. doing UDL, not even knowing we're doing UDL, right? Because it's just good teaching. The intersection and really actually saying, we are a fully implemented MTS, to raise your hand like that, I want to know what defines that. How do you know? What's the criterion for that? So I hope you have every answer for me today.
I have that answer for you. We created a rubric with 12 items that will be your fidelity measure for that. So woohoo, you can leave. All right. Next question that I have an answer to. What else came up for people when they were reflecting on this question? Why this interest? She's willing to share right there. I can see her face is all lit up. Yep, the woman turning around who thinks I'm not pointing to her. It's exactly who I'm thinking of. Right in front, right there. She's all lit up. She's got something to say.
Well, within the county that I'm working in, we are trying to embed MTSS within our QRAS, and then certainly UDL, given that we just received the inclusion grant.
Great. Okay, great.
So making connections.
Okay, awesome. Right, so for some of us, it's some intent of a vision that we're just starting to work toward, and others it's like, well, we think we've been doing it, but we don't have a measure that lets us know whether or not we've been doing it. Part of my interest in this is decreasing the burden on districts and schools to make sense of how to braid together all these multiple initiatives, right? So just hearing your open statement of all the things that fall under MTSS, and I'm like, oh, I feel the weight right here, right? It's just enormous. There's so much that is on our plate. And if we are to sustain any of it, we have to find sensible ways of braiding these things together, which hopefully will be helpful to you to start from the braid versus doing it after the fact for a retrofit. So as Louie and I began grappling with our thoughts, we started at a point of just saying, all right, so what do we think these two things are? Each of us recognize national experts in each of these content areas, these frameworks. How are we bringing these together? Me knowing enough about UDL to be a threat, her knowing enough about MTSS to be downright dangerous. How can we bring these two things together? So for those of you who don't have the 101, I'm about to talk you through some brief 101 points, but here are 3 links that may help you that are my go-tos for people just getting into the topics. Multi-tiered system of support, core word there, tiered. It's this notion that we can proactively provide educational experiences for students that build in an additive model of instruction. The working assumptions behind this, with a kind of eye toward prevention, is that all students are going to get some first best teach experience in the areas of academics, behavior, social emotional learning, and we're braiding those together as well, braiding on braiding. Some students may need some additional supports in order to meet the expectations that were laid out in the first best teach. For some, that additional may be an extra challenge because they've got that and they don't want to get bored, so we want to give them a little something more. For others, they're struggling to meet that standard, so we've got to bring them up through that some additional support. A few students are going to need much more intensified supports all day long in order to meet those core expectations. So it's an intensifying model that's thought about in tiers, although people represent it as a continuum of supports. People talk about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. The resource allocation matches that. So the supports in blue in this graphic acknowledge that in tiered instructional models, whether it's RTI or PBIS, we're acknowledging up front not all kids will receive the same resource allocation in order to meet our expectations. In order to support you to achieve these standards, all students will get this base core of resources, and then some other students and then a few students will require additional resource allocation. That's a given in the model. So there's no discussion about it's not fair that you're going to get extra support, because that's what you need in order to meet those minimal standards. Okay? So that's just in there. Now, the way that we've talked about MTSS for the last at least 5 years, we've talked about the eye toward differentiated instruction, the importance of leveraging UDL throughout the tiers of instruction, and the notion of integrating both in content areas, academics, behavior, social, emotional learning, and integrating our systems to become a unified system. We want to drop the S. So the integrated here refers to bringing together our silos of Title I, ELL, special ed, let's all bring that together. It's one unified system within this framework. So all kids have access to all resources as they're needed, when they need them, where they need them, versus kids going to resources. Universal design for learning builds from some basic ideas and understandings that we have now about how the brain functions and informs how children learn. It has an eye toward providing flexible ways that kids can get engaged, learners can be engaged with the learning process. It has an eye toward making sure that we're representing ideas in lots of different ways. Not everybody learns from looking at the text on a page or looking at photos or just manipulating things or just listening to something. We've got to represent ideas in multiple ways all the times and providing choice for kids to access that. Part of the intention here is that learners will develop an understanding of what supports work best for them when. And then finally, that idea of representation in multiple means plays out for how kids are going to show us what they know, action and expression. That we want to support learners to show us in a variety of ways. So my original background is in severe disabilities, and we applied this notion early on when thinking about literacy learning and kids demonstrating different skills. So as an example, a young student who doesn't speak in an activity where all kids are speaking aloud syllables in order to mark that they know syllabification, this kid was tapping on her legs as kids were noting the different syllables. Well, great, she's got syllabification right there. I don't care if it comes out of her mouth, she's showing me she gets the markers. I go with that. I don't need you to show it to me in just the right way, in just the right minute, on just the right day, right? So I've got to be more flexible and creative as an educator in that instance. The goal here with applying the principles and the guidelines and principles of universal design for learning is to develop expert learners. You'll see here at the top of the chart, the goal of learning, that individual learners are purposeful and motivated, that they're resourceful and knowledgeable, and that they are really good at showing what they know and kind of setting goals for their learning process. Right, so they're both strategic with those goals and they're directed toward those goals in their action and expression. You'll also see in this graphic, which I just love, a shift as we're developing expert learners that is an underpinning belief in UDL. We want to move from extrinsic drive to intrinsic drive for learners. Those are some basics. The text of what I've just said is restated here. I'm not going to reread that to you. I want to point you to a couple of other points here, though. Leaders that are creating a tiered delivery system are doing so to promote success for what they will say is all learners. And what I'll say is they're trying to reach more learners. Because so often I'll go into schools who say they're doing MTSS, and they talk about Tier 1 Universal for all learners, and yet there are separate programs down the hall of learners who are not getting access to that first best teach. Right? Or I'm watching somebody who's new to English getting pulled out for direct instruction in the middle of this great reading and language activity. I'm like, oh, that hurt. Right? Like, oh. So we know that there's an intent within MTSS to get to all learners, and yet I would say we're getting to more most of the time. UDL, same bottom line, but oriented at the teacher level, individual teachers working to shift their classroom to work for all, or at least more learners. In UDL, the belief is we do our best first design and deliver, and then we learn from that, and then we redesign for the next time through. And with each redesign, we should be reaching more and more learners proactively on that first best teach. Step up from that bottom bullet on UDL, I want to again restate and reemphasize, within UDL, there's a high value for learner voice and learner agency in the system. We want to promote learners to make the choices. What supports do you need right now? And Kathleen McClaskey has a great handout on learner agency and learner-directed environments. If you're interested, go to that link. Wonderful little nice charted summary that will help people who are new to that conversation get it pretty quickly. So we've got these two things side by side, and Louie and I were chatting all this out, and one of our other values came through, and that is, in both of these frameworks, there was an initial eye toward historically marginalized learners. Those that we know show up on our radar pretty quickly, and I've put the short list there, but you can add from your own populations of who you know is kind of traditionally underperforming in your system. That's a reflection, we believe, of the system, not of the learner. And so if we just design differently, we continue to close some of these gaps. So learners with significant cognitive disability labels are obviously on my radar and on hers. And as we design frameworks or design approaches for teachers, our belief is if you aim for the margins, you'll be able to get everybody else. If we can include those who are on the margins from the get-go, chances are we're also keeping engaged those students who have not been historically marginalized or historically underperforming. So a little bit of our beliefs out front there. And so that set up our grappling. We had all these wonderful shared interests, very happy to collaborate together. Louie and I had been collaborating already for about 5 or 6 years. We had these kind of core beliefs of all meaning all learners. We believed that learner variability was central to the design of educational programming and supports in schools. And we believe centrally that all learners can achieve to high standards. And if we believe that, what are the practices that support it? There were tensions that we quickly bumped up against in our conversations as we tried to each hold ourselves to speak from the MTSS lens as it's been applied nationally and the UDL lens as it's been applied nationally. And the first thing that came up was this tension around learner agency and this notion of an expert learner. While it's a central driving value and belief in universal design for learning communities, in MTSS, it's not a given. It may or may not be present as a school or district is implementing MTSS. Quite often, in fact, in MTSS, the educators are doing database decision-making to select for you your next best interventions that you're going to receive, and selecting from whom you'll receive those interventions and what materials will be used. So it's a very adult-directed learning experience in that sense. And that's been a habit within tiered models in the way that they've been rolled out in RTI, PBIS, and now with MTSS. I'm not bashing them, I'm in that group. That's kind of how we were all brought into the conversations. So that was one of the first tensions that came up. The next one was, what did we mean by screening or prevention? So tiered instructional models leverage this notion that if we get in there early on with our learners across all content areas and screen to see if we can predict if you might be at risk for struggling or failing in this content area, we can prevent it. So there's discussions in tiered instruction land of screeners, universal screeners. And I'm seeing upset stomachs around the room and furrowed brows, so you know the vibe I'm talking about there. There's a high value for making sure all students are screened within the first 4 weeks of school across all content areas. Part of the challenge is no standardized screening measure is built for all learners. Challenge 1. Challenge 2, there's not set protocols for when we administer these screeners, what are we doing with all the other learners for whom this does not work? How are we predicting and preventing for them in the conversation? And how does that data then inform the design of what we're about to lay out for our quarter, semester, or year? We both agreed around this notion of prevention. We both found common ground in describing not universal screening, but screening events and screening procedures, which may or may not have as a central tenet a standardized screening tool that's used for all learners. but that you have a way locally to review and reflect what's happening for each individual learner to be able to make predictions. Are you at risk of failing in my class? And if so, what needs to shift on my part in the environment with the materials for you? Which leads in nicely to the next tension that we had, which is around assessment. The assessments that we use in MTSS are heavily weighted toward attention to knowledge and skills. Are you demonstrating the desired proficiency levels with these state standards? Ends up being a huge organizing force. In that way, tiered instructional models have kind of reinforced the era of accountability, oh, bless no child left behind for all that it put into our lives. That tone of accountability has flowed into the design of MTSS, RTI, and PBIS, in that their aims still anchor on assessments that test your resourcefulness and your knowledge in content areas, and use those as indicators for whether or not you're going to get additional or intensified supports. So they function differently. In UDL, what Louis helped me see was assessments inform the instruction, period. Assessments inform how I'm going to support you to become an expert learner. The indicators in UDL for expert learning, those 6 characteristics that I talked about from the prior graphic, and here's another supportive graphic if you need to be reminded, are learners becoming purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, strategic and goal-directed. And I'm like, well, in MTSS, we're all in the purple. We're looking at your knowledge. That's what our assessments are organized. So of course I turned to Louis and I'm like, well, what do you have for measuring all these other things? What's your gift from the UDL community? It's your question back to, so give me something I can measure that with. It's not available yet. People. I'm like, great, okay, the honest answer. So there's your weakness, UDL community. Get on that. Like, if you're saying this is what's important, we've got to have some way of knowing that we've arrived there or not. What's our distance to the vision that we have for expert learners, and how will we know if we're actually developing these things? How will an individual teacher know for all their learners in their room? So, so we've got some questions and tensions there. Are we achieving standards? Are we achieving expert learners? And how do those two things come together in notions of assessment? So for those of you who have a background in MTSS and UDL, you're already leaning in and nodding at me, and I'm loving that. And for others of you, you're like, I think I might got it lost at the 10th jargon that he just said. There's a lot of jargon-heavy stuff in this. Hang in there. We're going to get to some practical discussions in just a second. The last thing is, as Louis and I did our work in bringing the 2 frameworks together, and this flat out got me in trouble with my MTSS colleagues, we ended up promoting a framework that no longer has tiers. So when I introduce our framework, you're no longer going to see the language of universal, additional or supplemental, and intensified. There's universal, the first best teach for everybody, our core curricula talked about in terms of goals, methods, materials, and assessments. But there are no tiers. So it's not tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. It's basically universal, and then there's everything else, which may or may not be delivered in other spaces, maybe in those first teach primary classrooms, whatever grade those are in. That's going to be up to those educators locally for what makes sense to them. So I had a few tears when we got to that aha, and it was totally after the fact. We got through developing the whole thing. I was like, this meets the intent of MTSS. I'm good. And then I reread it again. You know, like you set a project down, you walk away, you come back to it, and you pick it up again, and you're like, what was I thinking? And we had another series of meetings. I'm like, I don't know that we can put out a product that doesn't have tiers. Like, how can I do that? So I was kicked out of at least one of the churches of MTSS. All good, just joking. People are kind of my colleagues are now asking, I think, more thoughtful questions about what that means. So let's move to your thinking about these. I've laid out some of our big ideas that we grappled with, and there were 5 in particular that we'd like you to think about. And I say we because I co-constructed this with Louis in preparation for today. So there are going to be two sets of directions for this next thinking activity. You'll be referring to the handout that talks about the big ideas. It's a 5-item rubric that we developed. And if you need the visual, it's right there on the slide. Braiding MTSS and UDL, the big ideas. So everybody is going to have a chance to review that big ideas handout. I'm going to invite you to choose 2 of the 6 because we're not going to have time to cover all 6 in this next block, but we'll get you thinking about it. And then you're going to follow the steps that are here in green or pink. Green are for those people here in this room in person. Pink are for our virtual participants back at whatever site you're at. So in person, you're going to pick one of your first 2 big ideas, and you're going to go to one of the 6 flip charts that's around the room. They run in order that they are in the handout, starting with expert learner over here to my left, then prevention to the back, and then around. They're by each of the doors as you go around the room, if that helps you locate them. I'm going to give you a certain amount of time in your groups at your first one to talk with people, read the rubric, talk with your neighbors. Where are they on that rubric and their beliefs and big ideas? And then I'll chime you to transition to your second discussion station. You'll go to a second discussion station with your colleagues here. And then we'll come back and do a share out. For those at home, you can do this activity in pairs or individually. What I'll ask you to do at your local site virtually is to read the rubric descriptors and then select the best match for your current mindset. Let me just, if it's helpful to people to kind of, if you don't have it in front of you, see the handout that I'm referencing. So you'll see here in the rubric, we've laid out kind of a continuum for each of the conditions, the big ideas that we grappled with to bring the 2 frameworks together. Basically, what we're finding is what you believe about teaching and learning is going to drastically inform how you interpret either of these frameworks. So if you understand the directions, give me a thumbs up. If you do not understand the directions, give me a thumbs down. Okay? How can I clarify for you two? I'll go back to the directions. That might help you. Questions about the green directions? Oh, just looking for the handout in SCHED. Okay, great. Excellent.
You want us to find out where we are on this.
So you're going to look at the 6 characteristics. Pick 2 that you'd really like to talk about. Go to one of the first 2 stations around the room. And you're going to be met by colleagues here in the room, and you're just going to have a chat. Read the rubric to one another, find out where you are, talk about that. Okay? Go ahead, I'll give you 5 minutes at your first station. For those at home, you have 5 minutes for your first discussion with your partner or reflection. Okay, we're moving in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go ahead and virtually switch, pick another big idea to talk with somebody about. Those in the room, please move to another carousel conversation. We're moving with purpose, even though it's after lunch. We're back in about 20 seconds if you want to wrap up your conversations and get ready to come back. All right, please proceed back to your seats. And I'm going to ask you all to do some brief share outs if that actually we're going to go directly to the next activity. Okay, come on back, walk with purpose to your seats. Okay. So those big ideas undergird for us kind of the heart of some of the conversations that we were having and wanting to make sure were preserved as we brought together the new framework. So I want to set up for you kind of how to look at the actual practice profile, which is the actual document that represents the braiding of everything. That's the goods that you came for this afternoon. So let me kind of explain what you're going to be looking for if you want to queue up that document now and go to the third page where you'll see this header, Beliefs and Principles for Developing Expert Learners, as the first item. I believe it's page 3. There's a cover page and then there's 2 pages of blah, blah, blah stuff. And then you should see a blue header page. Go to that page. And I'll just orient you to how we put information together in a practice profile. Think about a practice profile as basically a rubric, right, of a way to organize information. When people say, you know, what are the essential ingredients? Like you're making a cake, what are the essential ingredients that you need? Well, you need eggs and I need flour. Well, depending on who you're making the cake for, you'll use flour. It might be rice flour, right? So we're going to put out the essential ingredients and then what those might look like. So we have our category headers, which are color-coded throughout the document. You'll see blues and grays and greens. Very fun. Then components, which are listed and numbered down the left-hand column, 1 through 12, with a big, bold statement about a key word, and then a little punch tagline, if you will, that gives the gist of what this thing is about. Then the next 3 columns are about the implementation status. Where are we at with implementing that thing? So similar to the rubric I just had you use, where there are statements along a continuum, you're going to locate your current practice in the rubric, and then that is associated with a score, which tells you how we are doing relative to this vision. Now, of course, the presumption is you agree with the profile that you're reading. If you disagree with components in there, I'm going to show you how you can go ahead and adapt this to make it yours locally. All right. So it's the basic orientation to it. I've just told you this information. So let's get you into actually playing around with it and looking at specific items. So open the practice profile document from SCHED if you haven't already. That's the cover page there in the upper right-hand corner, so you know what you're looking for. I want you to look at component item numbers 1, 6, 7A, 7B, and 12. And those components are beliefs, prevention, matching A and matching B, 7A and 7B, and then item number 12, which is about leveraging the framework for equity and inclusion. 1, 6, 7A, 7B, and 12. So let me actually take you to those in the document so we can all check to make sure we're looking at the right things here. Okay. So this is component 1, beliefs. Component 6, prevention. Thumbs up, yes. You found that? Great. Next page, 7A, 7B, matching and matching. And what you'll see as you read through this is one matching is about fostering learner agency, and one is about the adult decision-making with data. And then what did I say the last one was, number 12? There we go. And the last one, number 12, last page. So let me give you, I'm going to give you time to read through all 5 items independently and or with a neighbor. And then I want you to chat about why you think we included those 5. What do you think are the reasons for those 5 components being in this braiding point between MTSS and UDL? So develop a local rationale for why those 5 would be essential as we bring these 2 frameworks together. And then we're going to have some report outs here locally, so microphone runners get ready. But I'm going to give you, let's take a good 20 minutes to do the 5. So 4 minutes per item, per component, okay? I'll set a timer for 20 minutes. At home, on virtual sites, you have the documents. Go ahead and read and reflect with your neighbors. If you can hear me, raise your hand, please. If you can hear somebody else's voice, point at them, make funny faces. Okay. We're at 10 minutes into the 20 minutes I'm going to give you. I just want a quick check-in with you to find out how we're doing. Are there any big kind of roadblock questions coming up for you? Okay, then proceed with the next 10 minutes of discussions at your table. I'm hearing really good stuff. All right, let me check in. If you can hear my voice, please clap once. If you can hear my voice, please clap twice. If you can hear my voice and you're not clapping, we're going to point at you. Okay. We've got about a minute left for the dialogue, but it seems like most people have gotten through all of the big 6. 5. How many? I gave you 5, not 6. Sorry, let's get this back up on the screen. I do better with visuals. So what I'd like to do is to first just go through to check not your implementation status of it, right? This is not a judgy thing, right? I'm not like, are you doing this? If not, get out, right? That's not the goal here. I want to seek first to check that we all understand what the heck some of these words means, because there's a lot of words. So let me go first after the words. Let me start with beliefs. So as you look at the rubric for beliefs, and you'll note we differentiate between beliefs and principles. Some people merge these two things together in a problematic fashion. Beliefs are what's in your head about your learners and about your thinking about teaching and learning. Principles are how you behave because of what you believe. They're two different things. So we see people behaving in a way that is not aligned with what they say they believe. And so we're working to reconcile these two. You what? All day long. Huge. So questions. So looking at the beliefs one, did any questions come up about what do we mean by X belief that we have listed there? No questions on that, okay. Number 6, prevention. As many of you were starting to read that, I heard some audible sighs across the room, if only for the length of text we fit in that little box. So, our editing team included 12 national educators, and everybody wanted to anchor in on some word that they didn't like. Let me tell you, we were so pleased when we pressed publish. Any questions about the words and the meaning for the items within prevention?
Number 1 on 6.
Can you, so remind me what it says.
It says universal screening procedures inclusive of not but limited to standardized screening assessments are conducted for all learners during the 3rd and 4th week of school.
Yep.
So everybody?
Everybody.
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 Okay, and what does that look like?
Have you ever done universal screening of any kind before?
Yeah, for my own.
For your own students in your own class. So what this means, so what this looks like is that there is a schedule school-wide, if not district-wide, where within this window of time, we're going to go through and get some quick prevention measures, screening measures, in reading, writing, social, emotional skill sets, right? We're going to go right down the line, and we're going to have some measure that helps us make a prevention or a prediction statement.
But you're looking for district-wide, school-wide.
Ideally district-wide, minimally school-wide.
Okay, that's where my confusion.
Right, which is the tension of bringing, I'll bring you back to that slide where I talked about the difference between MTSS and UDL. UDL has been situated at individual teacher level. MTSS is a system framework. Thank you for chiming in on that. I like your little verbal and nonverbal agreements here, right? So the two things are really important to bring together. So we want to take, if this is good teacher practice, how is the district or school supporting that practice as part of the whole system? Versus you're really lucky if you get this one good teacher. No, we want that to be the whole system, right? I don't want to hope and pray I get the UDL skilled teacher, right? Yes, ma'am.
So I'm wondering about UDL. We always talk about anticipating that students are going to become and access a curriculum in different ways before they arrive with us. So how does that jive with doing an assessment at the beginning of the year? I'm just asking.
So there are going to be multiple prevention moments throughout the year, hopefully 3 at least, to allow educators a place of looking at some data, reflecting on each learner to say, are you on track? Am I doing what I need to do? Predicting the supports that you're going to need to do, anticipating that variability, and being able to reflect back, well, gosh, you were doing fine at our last screening measure event, and now it looks like you're struggling in this area. What might I learn looking back to be able to anticipate your support needs going forward? Thus, we have the structured events in there. Is that braiding better for you? Okay, thank you. Other questions about the prevention component? Yes, ma'am, over here. Can give her a mic. I wish there were a way for the virtual folks to like chat me up something with a question. Feeling bad.
I think just not a question, but a comment that I really like the fact that all of those areas are there, because you can pick a screening tool or a universal screening tool and not effectively plan in all of those areas and how you're going to use that data. And then secondly, or two other, is that most tools, as you said earlier, are addressing academics. And do you have a universal screening tool in your district that does assess all of those areas? And then what if, not what if, when you have students who cannot access the universal screening tool you identified, like in 3, what are you going to do? So I think it really is, this is a great section in making sure that if you've picked one, which is awesome, you're using it appropriately, and that this rubric really helps to make sure that you're doing that.
Super. Any other praise you would like to give us?
Come to our district.
I love it. I would love to hang with you and chat. I love good thinking, and that's what I'm seeing here, right? Like, there's a lot packed into the prevention one, right? This notion that we're actually going to look at our screening measures and say, what does it not capture that we need to capture, is new for some of us. What other screening measures or screening processes do I need for the learners for whom my, quote, universal screener does not work? You know, I go into these, so many of you know my background is in severe disabilities originally, back in the day. And I was trained as a speech pathologist. And so I know a little bit about literacy. And I'll go into these schools that have these universal screeners for reading, and they're talking fluency measures for oral reading fluency. And I'm like, how's that working for your kids who don't talk? What's your screening approach with them? And most schools, given where we are right now in 2019, will say, I don't know if that program has a screener. All kinds of wrong in that answer, right? Like, but that's where they are. So we've got to meet them there to say, well, one, can we get them out of the program and get them alongside non-disabled peers? 2, if you value prevention, if you're in your belief box, you have that you believe in prevention efforts, how are you preventing failure for this learner? Right? So I really do appreciate you responding to the nuances in that prevention one, because there's a, what's the non-swear word? Boatload of work in that box. Let's move to matching. Let's do 7A first. Well, actually, we'll just do both 7A and 7B. Any comments, reflections, questions, clarifying what we intend by the matching components? Yes? No, go ahead. She's on a roll. Let's give you the mic.
I think it's awesome because it addresses both the school personnel and student ownership, and that there's, even though they're separate, it's a match between the two also. So, which then says, you know, our teachers have the creativity, and they have some, you know, ownership in that, in making their learning accessible to all kids. But just as equally important, our students need to select what's best for them to learn, that we're responsible to have it all out, and then the students have the choice to then pick what they need.
Yep. Absolutely. When we originally wrote number 7, we had the student focus portion as like one sub-bullet that said that they would be engaged with a menu of support choices. And we're like, that totally does not capture what we intend here. We need to go all out. It needs to be its own statement here. But we wanted to keep them connected to make the point that we can't just be, we can't be the adult-driven nature of matching you to the just right intervention and not helping you understand why or how we got there, and then bringing your voice into that so that we are shifting. Maybe it starts off adult-directed, but we should be shifting to learner-directed work. How empowering would that be? Yes?
So I particularly like the focus on the integrated nature of learning and not separating out academic behavior, which I like to use the word communication instead of behavior sometimes, and social emotional factors, because I think what you tend to see is over here we're going to take care of communication, over here we're going to take care of behavior, and over here maybe OT if you're lucky enough to get it, and then come back to the class and put it all together. So I love the integrated approach.
Which again, that integration started off from the efforts of the tiered models and UDL's focus on expert learner. And we were like, well, let's bring all that together, right? Like that's all good sauce. Let's put it all in there. Yes.
So I'm still struggling with our continued focus on we're going to meet the needs of all students. And every place we go, we talk about students' needs rather than their strengths. And I'm wondering when we're going to shift our vocabulary around that, because if we're truly going to look at asset-based learning, we're going to have to get rid of that, you need this and you need that.
Yeah, and I'll be completely transparent. Louis and I had several lengthy conversations about this exact tension. And where we kind of landed in a safe place was we need to develop a tool that most of the audience members that we know of could hear it. And so we return to the language of needs because we feel like one of the things our learners need are educators who are asset-based and strengths-based. And for me, needs doesn't mean you have a deficit. For me, needs mean, and I'm the author, so I get to make up my own definition. For me, needs means what challenge I may need for something, right? So if you're kind of teaching to the middle and I am bored out of my mind, and now I'm off on some other shiny object, what I need is greater challenge, right? I need you to up it for me. Take advantage of my strengths, my interests. If you're applying UDL well, you're starting by recruiting interests anyway, which should put you in a strengths-based orientation. Sorry, go ahead.
So the other word that gets me is rigor. So I hear rigor getting batted about in all kinds of ways. And it winds up in vision and mission statements and all kinds of ways.
Yep. Rigor is
so I think
not
that's
just
another
like more
one.
work. Rigor is not just more work.
Well, I don't think, unless you have a strong definition for it, you can't even get a hold of it.
Yep.
And
Did we
so
put
that
our-
would be something, I'm just going to say that's the other word that I've been
Did we?
struggling with. No, it's not in there. Rigor's not, well, I don't see it. I didn't see rigor in there. But
At one point it was,
I'm
and we
just-
had a link to a way that we operationalize
Okay.
it. It may have been taken out. So Retta Hammond's work on rigor in terms of cultural responsive practice, I find to be really solid. I'd encourage people who want to have the conversation about rigor to look at her work, but I have 4 minutes to get you through the rest of this activity. So I want to move us to leveraging for equity and inclusion. Any questions that came up for why that one's in there? Or understanding it? Just made sense to you? Okay. We wouldn't be able to present it at this conference if we didn't put the word in there. No, that's not why we put it in there. We wanted to purposely acknowledge that we see people, quote, doing MTSS, and they're not addressing equity or inclusion. We see people, quote, doing UDL, and they're not addressing equity or inclusion, which I find shocking. If you're doing UDL well, by those values and principles, how could you not be including everybody? But it's out there and it's happening, right? We're still having people say, we do UDL and we have a moderate to severe program down the hallway. Right? We do UDL and for Title I services, you go over there. Right? Like, no. We got to bring all this together. So for us, item number 12 really is our kind of our bucket of being able to disrupt and dismantle systems that are systematically oppressing everybody and holding us all back. There was a conversation at the back table about resource allocation. And, you know, when you're at a point of like, well, we don't have enough resources. Okay, well, sit down and list off what are the ones you need and why do you need them. And if that's not getting you where you go, make the list of the resources that you currently have that you don't need anymore. Right? Like I would put the moderate to severe program on the list of resources that we currently are using that we don't need anymore. Right? We can shift that model. We're pouring a bunch of money into this separate space and a bunch of people, and we could use that differently. Because of an interest in wrapping up, I want to go to giving you an opportunity to rate yourselves and your implementation status. Know that what you say here stays here. And I believe the video recording is of me, not of you, so your school scores will not be out there. But I'd like you to give me a fist to 5 on your current status of some of these items. So go back to item 1, your core beliefs. So don't follow the rubric because it's going to contain you too much. I'm just going to have you make a judgment. So we talked about the beliefs that were there. Fist being no, we don't do those. 5 being yes, absolutely, we live by those beliefs. Where would you put yourselves? Fist to 5. Okay. Seeing ranges around the room from a fist up to a very excited 5. And yours are the 2 smallest, so it's a 2, but like on a mini version. Yeah, maybe there's a, okay, all right. Yeah, love that lens. Look at her, she just went, ooh. Right, and this, because this impacts resource allocation. This impacts resource allocation. When everybody's kind of choosing their own curricula and choosing their own approaches, that's resources being sprayed into the wind. We gotta get back to the center here. Let's do the matching ones. 7A and 7, let's do 7A first, fist to 5. I skipped over prevention. I'm going right to matching, 7A. Fist to 5. Seeing a lot of fists and a couple of 2s and a 4, all right? 7B. You struggled with which one finger to put up. I saw you. Okay. I think I want to come hang and see what it looks like in your school. All right, and number 12, the leveraging any frameworks that you're using for equity and inclusion. Fist to 5, where are you at with that? All right, so I'm seeing a range. This is good. It's helpful for us in kind of checking, like, if you can locate yourself somewhere in this information, then hopefully it's helpful to you, which is the intent. So we encourage you to take this back to your local district. If you find value in any part of it, the first thing I would encourage you to do is translate it from a PDF file to a Word file. Clip off the last 2 columns. Take the first 12, the 12 items with the first 2 columns, and make it a conversation, a dialogue, not a rating event. What do you think? Do you believe what we're reading here? Right? Take the scoring part out of it and have a dialogue with your colleagues. How are we thinking about teaching and learning, and what's the framework that we have that's guiding and focusing us? Second, if there are words or jargon in there that are problematic for you or your team, change them. Make them yours, right? Check that you're preserving the intent that we're going after, because there is an evidence base behind every single flippin' word in there. But if it doesn't resonate with how you would describe it, then describe it a different way. By all means, make it yours. You do not have to have our logos and our names on there. This is meant for changing the world, so take it and make it yours. Third, if as you walk away from here, you're like, you know, I thought I understood 7A and 7B, and now I don't, drop me an email, okay? Go to the website and hit the chat button. We can have a chat via my website. Or you can just drop me a note and ask me questions. It's absolutely fine. I try to be as available as possible to people who have come to my trainings and who have thoughtful questions. So if you want good things to happen, I'm with you. I want good things to happen too. So please reach out. That applies to anybody virtually as well. I can't see any of you, but I'll just trust if you're emailing me, you are here. Any final questions that I can answer before you go? I know we're lapping into break time. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to know if, my head is spinning right now, but is this framework and these ideas and the push for implementing these things, is it statewide? I mean, are we getting, okay, maybe I should reframe it. Are administrators invited to participate? I mean, I know they're invited to participate today, but I mean, are they getting, you know, kind of ambushed with this somewhere?
Wow, that makes it sound very inviting.
I mean,
I don't know if they're being ambushed
optional,
anywhere.
I'm just saying if it's optional, I'm asking if it's optional or is it something the state is pushing everybody to do?
So there's no accountability with what I've just talked about whatsoever. This is an idea that
Right.
if you're pursuing MTSS and if you are pursuing MTSS and UDL, why not braid those things together
Right.
instead of killing yourself with two different initiatives? There are multiple statewide initiatives that you can check with your local county leaders, and I'm pointing to the two people with inclusionary
Okay.
clothing on here who can give you the local answer to that, but she wants to
Okay.
go right now, so go ahead.
I would recommend one systems, like reading one system. It's a little bit older now, it's like 4 years old, but it did come out from a task force from the state, and it has kicked off that whole notion of inclusion. So, and UDL and MTSS all at the same time. So yes, I have to say yes. It is a state initiative.
There you go. There you go. Thank you for your energy and attention. I've cut into your break. Go get a drink, relax, and enjoy the last part of this amazing conference. Thank you so much.